And welcome back to CT Sports Now here on Vantage Sportsnet. And we have moved over to our interview set, and I'm really thrilled to introduce and bring on and talk to Chris Nashawaty, a film critic and author, film critic from Entertainment Weekly, author of a brand new book, Caddyshack, The Making of a Hollywood Cinderella Story. Chris, I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you're a Connecticut guy now living in Norwalk. This book, an iconic movie. What went into what gave you the idea to go behind the scenes and find out how this was all made?
Well, it's as a movie writer, I write a lot of stories about the making of movies, and most of the time they're pretty uneventful stories. But Caddyshack is a story where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, but somehow they still got a great movie out of it. I originally wrote a story for Sports Illustrated back in 2010 about the making of the movie. And as I was interviewing people like Chevy Chase and Bill Murray and the director Harold Ramis, I sort of quickly realized that there was more than just a 5-page magazine story there. There were so many great stories about golf and so many great stories about how movies are made and how they can go wrong, and about drugs in the 70s. It was just really just a bonanza of great anecdotes.
So this movie was filmed in about a 3-month period in Florida, and it's loosely based, I guess, on Bill Murray and Brian Doyle Murray, one of his older brothers, who's a co-writer of this. Yeah. They're growing up, their childhood.
Yeah, the Murrays are very much like the main character of the movie, Danny Noonan. They're a working class Irish family. They had 9 kids, and the Murrays grew up just north of Chicago. And in order to pay their tuition at Jesuit school, they would caddy as kids, as teenagers. So Bill Murray and his brothers Brian and all of the other ones, they had these great stories about being shag boys and about being caddies, meeting crazy, country club members and the other nutty caddies that they caddied with. So they channeled all of those stories into Caddyshack. And so it's a in a way, very autobiographical Murray movie.
And of course, Bill, and in this scene in particular that we see right here, that's the Cinderella. So that's where you got the title for your book. But that was off the cuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of Bill Murray's stuff in the movie, believe it or not, is improvised. He was a late addition to the cast, and Bill Murray had had such experience in improv, working at Second City in Chicago, on Saturday Night Live. He was faster on his feet, and arguably still is, than any other actor working. So when they knew they had Bill, they just left open white space in the script, and it just said, Bill riffs here, because they knew he could come up with stuff that was better than they could write. And Cinderella's story, the most famous scene in the movie, is all off the top of his head.
And he's kind of famous for having worked with and disagreed with, at a pretty high level, Chevy Chase, who's in this movie. How much was Chevy's stuff ad-libbed? Another Second City guy in the whole, Saturday Night Live and the whole bit. How much of that was scripted?
Yeah, no, I mean, Chevy had lines written in the script, but he had fun with them.
Was that?
Be the Ball was in the script,
oh.
But he really tweaked and freestyled on the lines that were given to him. So they never really quite knew what he was going to do. He, like Bill, is just very fast on his feet, and he can just come up with things spontaneously that are better than a writer can sit down and write. So they had faith in these actors that they really could bring the movie to life.
Yeah, it's a movie with an ensemble cast, but a well-known cast from a variety of comedy. Comedy obviously has different areas, genres, and Rodney Dangerfield, Ted Knight came from a different one.
Yeah.
And how did that mix well?
Not well. It was very combustible on the set. Ted Knight and Rodney Dangerfield, very different guys and very different approaches to comedy. They did not get along at all. Ted Knight was a classically trained actor where you learn the script, you come prepared, and you say everything that's in the script. Right. Whereas Rodney Dangerfield just spouts out anything that comes into his mind because he's Rodney Dangerfield. So when they were doing scenes together, it would really bother Ted Knight that Rodney was just coming up with stuff that wasn't in the script. And the two of them really clashed a lot. So the anger that you see in Ted Knight's Judge Smales character, that's real. That's not acting. That is real anger.
So with all of these combustible elements and a lot of opposition. How, in your mind, as you did all your research and wrote the book, how did it all come together? Why did it become successful?
You know, it's funny. It's interesting that the movie wasn't that successful when it first came out. The critics really dogpiled on it. The reviews were savage. It did okay at the box office. It was only later with VHS and DVD, and it would come on cable late at night, that the movie started to develop this cult following. People would watch it over and over again. They'd learn the lines. So now when you're at a sporting event and someone's at the free throw line and someone yells out Noonan, you know, from the
Right.
movie, you know exactly what they're talking about. And you also know that that's someone you can get along with, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And Noonan could have been Mickey Rourke?
Yeah, one of the weirdest stories in the making of the movie is Michael O'Keefe, the actor who plays Danny Noonan, the young caddy. They were down to two people casting the movie. It was either going to be Michael O'Keefe or Mickey Rourke, which, when you think about it, would be a very, very different movie, a very intense movie, not a comedy.
I don't think the character would die in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And but they went with Michael O'Keefe because he told the casting agent that he was a scratch golfer. And even though he was lying, he could golf, but he wasn't that great.
Right.
So after he got the part, for 2 months, he played every day at Winged Foot. His dad knew the pro there, and he really got his game in good shape by the time they started shooting.
And the gopher was a much smaller initial role.
Yeah, I mean, basically everything you're asking is absolutely right. The movie is, as it was conceived versus how it came out, are completely different. You know, they just made stuff up as they went along. So the gopher, they only shot one scene with the gopher initially. It was a very small part of the movie. But the movie was such a mess by the time they got to the editing room, because they had been improvising so much and throwing the script in the trash, that none of the scenes made sense with the scene before it or after it. So they needed something to connect all of these bits. So they said, why don't we have the gopher come back and he'll connect all these scenes? So they begged the studio for more money. They built an animatronic gopher. They shot more scenes with the gopher, and they put him in. So now the movie sort of flows a little bit thanks to the gopher.
Wow, it flows. This interview, I could go on and talk about this for a long, long time. I wish we had more time. Chris Nashawaty, thank you so much for coming on. Here's the book, Caddyshack, The Making of a Hollywood Cinderella Story. He's also trying to get total consciousness eventually. I wish you all the best with that. Will there be another behind-the-scenes sports movie book in your future?
You never know. Never say never. We'll see.
All right. Well, never say never as far as we're coming back with more CT Sports Now right after this.